his dominance was so significant. Andre and Hogan were first friends for a while, and then Andre turns back, and that's how this match kind of basically got set up.
Yeah, it's with Andre, like I wasn't a big wrestling fan back in the day, probably especially when this took place. But I mean, falling into it like 10 years later, and I even knew of that story of Hulk Hogan slamming Andre the Giant prior to me even being a wrestling fan. That was a big pulp culture moment.
Oh yeah, by far.
And the WWE's hung on to it. Like I said, they use it for promo material. They usually use it for the Then, Now, and Forever thing that they play against before
Absolutely.
every broadcast. So it was very, very significant. And I recently listened to someone talk about this match, and they had mentioned that Andre was actually in a lot of pain during the match, to where he had to wear a brace on his back so he could take the bump, but he knew he had to do it for Hulk Hogan to basically carry the torch for WWF for years later, which he did. For several years later, Hulk Hogan is arguably one of the largest wrestlers in terms of pulp culture stands for a long time. The only people that have now superseded that is, I mean, to me, it's a tie between Rock and Steve Austin. Where it's kind of weird because Rock is more of a movie star now, and then Steve Austin is more of a TV star now. They kind of went on their own, like, different paths, but both of them are arguably the next Hogan, and since then, John Cena's kind of carried that torch.
Oh yeah, I mean, you have your big rivalries, obviously, with Andre and Hulk Hogan. Yeah, that they weren't a long rivalry as far as, like, you have your Rock and Austin and stuff like that, but as more or less, it was just such an iconic match. That's what made it so big. It was in, like, they had this huge long heat for, years or whatnot, but it was just there was a heat in this pinnacle moment in this match, what happened in the situation. But you're talking about Rock and Austin. It was like, so they had especially when Austin was, one away, Rock was able to be the number one guy, period, top face. Yeah, it was always that hump that, they had Austin up there. Austin was what rejuvenated after Hogan. Of course, and then after that, came along Cena. So, that's just, but yeah, Andre was that big, big stepping stone, the torch, for Hogan. So a lot of people, and kind of professionally, you can say, but also personally don't like Hogan. Mainly a lot of fans, because it was, but you gotta give him credit. He did a lot for the business, and
he did.
Whatever, absolutely won all the time. It was one of those things where if you don't know wrestling at all, period, it doesn't matter. You still know Hulk Hogan. I mean, in this day, back then, if you didn't watch one thing about wrestling, didn't give a damn about it, never mattered to you, you still knew Hulk Hogan, and period. So it's just one of those pop culture.
Yeah, and with Hogan, and I only referenced the Rock thing because like I say, he carried the torch after Andre, and I do believe he referenced Andre as well when he went to go face the Rock, because I want to say he remembered talking to Andre before his match and why Andre did it, and he referenced that as a point why he had to do what he had to do for Rock. So I mean, this was one of those things that kind of was very significant for the WWF and helped them carry on.
So it was it was interesting. Listening to, I forgot, it's an old documentary. Hogan and they were talking about this match, and Hogan and Vince were talking about what led up to it, and Hogan had the plans written out on paper, and Andre wouldn't talk him too much. He's like, told him, like, write down stuff, and Hogan was nervous as hell going to that match. He's like, yeah, Vince, is Andre gonna do this? Is Andre gonna? He's like, Vince wouldn't give him a whole lot of answers. Like, we'll see what Andre does, and he was nervous. He's like, he's not telling me a whole lot. He's not remarking a lot about the match. He just knows what's written down. Hogan wrote the match out, and he was nervous. But Andre did the honors. He did exactly what was written down and followed suit. But it was it was funny when he watched the interview. It was interesting because he was nervous going to that match, how well it was going to play out or not, and what Andre was really going to do. But Andre did it. But anyway, it just was interesting.
Yeah, it was, and Hogan was one of those guys that can make a lot out of nothing, and this was an example of that. What'd you end up rating it?
I gave it I think it was 7.
7. I actually did 7.5, but also gave it a little bit of a boost because of the significance of it. You can tell that the crowd was super into this match.
Well, yeah, and that was the match. That was it. And Hulkamania was still young, man. I don't mean Hulk Hogan himself. I mean Hulk Hogan was still young too, but fairly young for time frame. And Hulkamania itself was young. It was only a few years old, so it was just it was a much needed iconic moment that happened. Mm-hmm. It went over well. So yeah. Hulkamania rule one while forever, right?
So I have a question for you.
Yeah,
and
sure.
This has to do with something I saw on a social media thing, and actually someone broke it down. Who do you think is the better wrestler, Hulk Hogan or John Cena?
John Cena.
He said the same thing, and I actually watched him break down why. It has a lot to do with how versatile John Cena is, both in ring and on the mic.
Mm-hmm. Hogan wasn't really he was a wrestler. He was a wrestler, he was, but he wasn't a wrestler's wrestler. I don't mean like a technical like a Kurt Angle. I don't mean that. I mean he had a few moves. He sold really well. He was a great seller. Hogan. He had the character and everything. He was in the right time, right place, right everything. John Cena was, like I said, more versatile. He had a lot more to his character. He has more ability than what gets led on to. I mean, I'm not saying I don't know. Especially if you go back and watch John Cena early in his career, you see a lot more to him than there was the last several years. You see a lot more to him, and I think a lot of people that, especially the younger fans, much younger fans, that unless you go back to the network and watch a lot of stuff, that's just 3-move scene or whatever. I'm like, there was more to him in his earlier part of career, but his character changed, and he had a signature stuff, and that's why some people like you said, who's better, Hogan or Cena? But Cena wouldn't be ever compared to that if it wasn't because he had his signature moves that he's known for. Like you have your Hulk Hogan that was known for certain signature stuff. So, but yeah, if you're going to ask me who's a better wrestler, yeah, I've seen him.
Yeah, again, I was kind of shocked that they mentioned that, but then once they broke it down why, I'm like, okay, I can see that. Because Cena is definitely more versatile. He's not the same person as Hulk Hogan. Yeah. Hulk Hogan was just mainly, he had kind of, I hate to say it, he had one gear.
I did. I mean, it's maybe not nice to say it. I don't know, but it's, that's it. I said, he had the one gear and great character, couple moves, great seller. That was it, really.
But with Hogan, the only thing that he has on Cena is he had one of the most observed heel turns.
Oh yeah, by far, not even questionable. Not even can't even question that by far. I mean, the John Cena's heel run was, it was good for what it was at the time. I'm not saying it's bad. There was no major significance. Like we obviously talk about Hogan because when Cena turned was heel for his run. It was too early in his career as far as making a big splash like the NWO stuff, and Cena wasn't. If Cena was, at the huge prime of his career when he was as big as he was, as far as that thing is active, he would turn heel, and yeah, it'd been interesting to see how much. I hate to compare with generations and factions and so forth, but it'd been interesting to see how well it would have been booked and how well it would have played out and how much of more effect it would have had. Like I said, not to compare, but it was more or less you would have seen. I don't think Cena would have been able to outdo the Hogan heel turn, honestly, if you ask me personally. The
perfect time would have been the embrace the hate portion.
Oh yeah, but and it would have been good. I mean, as far as popularity, I guess as far as like wow, like it's a shock absorber. But it was like how well. I mean, a Hogan heel turn was something that it can never be duplicated, and it will never be. I mean, because it was something that in the time frame it was. Man, it just. Yeah, I don't even think a Cena heel turn would have been as big, not even close to as big as a Hogan heel turn. I mean, it would have been great. I mean, it would have been like probably entertaining, but you can say what it should have, could have, whatever. But it's just, I don't think it would have been that. Definitely wouldn't have been as significant. But it would have been big, just not Hulk Hogan turning heel, making EWO and everything. But yeah, but. And, if you want to go to fantasy booking, if say that Cena would have turned heel, if he would have had a faction, who would he picked, and how would that have gone, and how well would that would have went over even the pop culture? So, you know what I mean?
Right. It's just, like I said, it made me think of it because we were talking about.
Oh, yeah, that's fine. That's just,
Yeah, so I might as well bring it up now because I don't know when's the next time we're going to talk about Hulk Hogan.
Yeah. I never know. I have no idea. We bring up everything.
Right. So let's go ahead and call it a wrap. That was the WrestleMania 3. You can get us on Spreaker, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and YouTube. You can follow us on Twitter at WrestlingSCool. Go ahead and hit him with the rest.
For Instagram, it's at Wrestling Still Cool. Facebook, Wrestling Still Cool. TikTok is at Wrestling Still Cool 90. LinkedIn is Wrestling Still Cool. And get us on email at WrestlingStillCool@gmail.com.
All right, guys, that'll be it from us for this episode. Again, it was WrestleMania 3. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day. And if you want to watch this, you can see it on Peacock. That's where all the WWE Network stuff is. And make sure to watch to the end so you can see Brock Lesnar versus Andre the Giant versus Hulk Hogan. Enjoy the rest of your day.